Please welcome our Master of Ceremonies, David Mcginty, Principal at H14 Development Group, and a member of the BoardSource Board of Directors.
Hello, how are you? Good, great. I want to welcome you to our Leadership Luncheon and Judith O'Connor Memorial Program, which honors the legacy of a former president and CEO of BoardSource, Judith O'Connor. Today, first I would like to thank Prudential, who is our presenting sponsor, and Target, who is sponsoring the luncheon that we're going to have. So for the next 2 hours, we're going to feed your bodies and your minds with a little bit of thought on advocacy, as well as what the next generation of change means, both for the types of leaders that we bring into nonprofit organizations, as well as the ways that we fund and implement change in our communities. First, we're going to have a conversation between our CEO, Ann Wallestad, and Sonya Campion, who is one of the leaders of Funders Together to End Homelessness, which is a national network of foundations working to end homelessness through strategic, innovative, and effective solutions. Sonya and Ann will discuss the critical role that boards play in advocacy, as well as how advocacy can build lasting change. Following that conversation, we'll have lunch. Do note that we'll have dessert and coffee after the entire program is over, just outside in the California Lounge. After lunch, we'll have remarks from our 2013 Judith O'Connor speaker, Sterling Spearin, who is the CEO of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. So right now, what I would like to note is that BoardSource, we have a very clear commitment to serving a broad range of nonprofit organizations, especially smaller nonprofits, and in engaging next-gen social leaders in our organizations. As part of that investment, this is the 7th year that we've hosted the Judith O'Connor Memorial, that the Judith O'Connor Memorial Fund has supported our JOC scholars to attend the BLF and contribute to the thought leadership that comes out for years to come, as well as find ways to engage young, innovative leaders in board governance. So each of our JOC scholars has demonstrated leadership ability and made meaningful contributions to their organizations. So with great pleasure, I would like to present to you the JOC scholars for 2013 who will join me on stage right now. So please, go ahead. The scholars are Eric Fogel, Adrian Etherton, Janice Gates, Jason Toriano, Anissa Mwinga, Susan Malay, Mary Bruce, Mona Mawafi, Mary McElroy, Ivan Canada, Justice Wadner, Lee Hart, and Ana Estrada. Yeah, they're good looking, you know, you could soak it in a little bit. So now to move on to the next portion of our event, I would like to welcome Ann Wallestad and Sonya Campion to the stage.
Oh, sure. You can take the further chair.
Oh dear.
And we didn't plan our outfits.
Bigger than your office. This isn't what we rehearsed.
But we do have a dance routine. Sonya, thank you so much for being here and for taking the time to have a conversation about something that I know is incredibly important to both of us, and that is the role that boards can and should be playing, in my opinion, in terms of advocating for their missions. Obviously, I spoke about this a little bit yesterday in terms of the potential that there is for big change and big, really positive change. So our conversation today is really a beginning of a campaign that we hope you all will be involved in. And you have an interesting sort of path or story in terms of how you came to this work. first as a fundraiser, as a board member, and now as a trustee. Tell us a little bit about why this is so important to you.
Well, I've been a fundraiser for a long time. I think it's in your book, but I think I hit the 30-year mark recently. And that's changed quite a bit. And I was a consultant working on capital campaigns. And I remember a very successful campaign, of course, because they had brilliant counsel. And, but everyone was happy, everyone was singing and holding hands afterwards. And then I saw board members taking positions in their personal life on political issues. It happened to be a human service agency. And they had taken is kind of how I got to thinking about it. They had about $4 to $6 million in a housing levy as part of their campaign. And these board members in their private lives were taking positions against the housing levy after the campaign. And I called the CEO and I said, whoa, 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 whoa. You know, we're a small town, Seattle. We're not, you can't really do things like that without people saying, wait a minute, aren't you on the board of? So I said, you better let your board members know that they are representing an organization that they're contradicting themselves. And the board member, the CEO said, whoa, 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 no, 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 no politics in the boardroom. And I thought she was right, and I understood, but it didn't sink well. And then also about that time, or not about that time, a long time ago, I was a young board member of a social service agency, and I'll never forget this. It was a human service, again, youth services, but we watched that agency ride themselves down into non-existence. And I actually didn't know what role we should be playing in advocacy. It's just every month we heard from the board member, the CEO, of the less money, less money, less money, as well as the policies that were affecting the kids that we serve until we were a fraction of our mission. And I feel like we rode that down, and had we done something, perhaps it could have been differently. And that agency eventually merged with another organization. So those things were in my mind of, whoa, there's got to be a better way here. And my husband and I started our foundation in 2005, and we used the principles to start the foundation that we used to grow the resources. And my husband started a company called Zoomies, which is the largest action sports retailer in the world. And their vision, or their principles, were very, very simple. It was leverage, risk, vision, and leadership. Oh, and have fun. You know, go hard or go home. So we used those principles when we started our foundation, and we actually didn't know that that was unique in philanthropy. And our two main issues are preserving wilderness, the largest remaining wilderness left, like the Arctic Refuge. Well, you can't buy it. You have to play ball with advocacy. It's 20 million acres, so we have to work with public policy. But the other issue that we work on is around ending homelessness through investing in advocacy. And when we took a look at how advocacy was done in that arena, it was primarily professional staff. And we weren't seeing very many board members. And the good side of it is elected officials saw professional staff as experts in that area and really trusted them. The bad side is we kept pushing that rock up the mountain every year and just getting a fraction. So we thought about Washington State alone, and in Washington State there's about 500 organizations that work on homelessness or affordable housing, and that's 5,000 to 10,000 board members. And so it got us thinking, wow, what if we were to mobilize a fraction of 5,000 to 10,000 board members? I think we could change the dialogue. So that's a long answer to probably a short question, but.
It's a good answer. It's a good answer. One of the things we talked about yesterday is that according to the BoardSource Governance Index, fewer than half of all boards report that they are actively engaged in advocacy, which, given the potential for board members to play a really active role, is potentially a little surprising. Why do you think that is?
You know, I think there's a big misperception. I think a lot of board members come to the nonprofit sector thinking that charity is the answer and that philanthropy can do it all or their leadership can do it all. And a lot of board members aren't really aware of their organization's relationship to public policy or to public support. In fact, I was on a board of an organization where in Seattle in the Northwest, we have a lot of young libertarian techie people. And you guys might envy us thinking that they're all millionaires and they give us all their money, but with it comes their politics, which they don't have any. A lot of them are libertarian. So we had a young techie board chair and of this human service, and her goal was to get that organization off the public dole. And I asked her, what does she mean by that? And because we were the largest contractor to the county and city on providing services. It wasn't dole. And that was kind of a wake-up to me of a lot of board members really don't even understand the relationship of their organization to the public sector. And EDs have limited bandwidth to bring that into the boardroom. And foundations aren't really supporting the capacity needed to provide just bandwidth and time to talk about advocacy. So it's kind of a, and then there's always the one where everyone thinks it's illegal and that advocacy is about taking to the streets. And you know, advocacy, it's funny when we say that word because everyone has a different term. There's the bra burners and taking to the street, or the WTO riots, you know, in Seattle on one end. And then the far other end is you guys in California have a great example happening right now with the California Association of Nonprofits. They launched a campaign last year called Vote Your Mission. And all it was encouraging the nonprofit sector to wake up. And if you're part of an organization, staff, client, board, vote your mission, pay attention. That's all it was. And they even incorporated into board job descriptions, as long as I'm a member of this board, I will vote. Now think about if that was part of your job description, at least it would wake up the conversation in the boardroom of why is that important? And you could then have the conversation. So it's everything from just that awareness about why you need to be part of the public process to taking to the streets. Once you get to know me, the taking to the streets is my preferred way of getting things done, but I can go both ways.
Well, and I think you're right that there's a ton of misinformation just about what organizations can and cannot do, which does contribute to the confusion and the potential angst around engaging in advocacy. So we're actually going to pause here, and we're going to invite you all to participate. Those of you who have participated in polling before, help those at your table who aren't. But if you have a cell phone and would like to participate, we're going to ask some questions and get just kind of a pulse on the room. So we've got instructions on how to use the polling up on the screen here. So you just open up a text, and then in the two, and this is going to be the same for all of them, it's 22333. And then in the body of the text, you will include the numeric value for the response that you would like to select. Everybody got it? Okay, let's go ahead and see that question then. Are you having technical difficulties?
Oh, they see it.
Oh, great. Sorry, I don't see it. So the first question is just general sense of what your involvement is with advocacy right now. So if it's, here we go.
This is so exciting.
And I see people still responding, so we'll give you a little more time. So the options are one of our top strategies for achieving impact, something that we occasionally do, and not something that we do. Oh, the second option.
2752.
I think it's actually got more numerals on it. It's cutting off. 275 252 is the second option. Okay, we'll go ahead and call this the final. Nope, still moving. Moving a lot. There we go. Enough votes and you get to see the number. Okay, we have another question for you. So this will be our final for the role that advocacy plays in your organization. So 23%, one of your top strategies, 39% something that you occasionally do, and 39% not something that you do. The next question speaks to the board's role in those advocacy efforts. So if your board is actively involved in your advocacy efforts, that's that first number. Not involved in advocacy, or not applicable because your organization is not involved in advocacy at all.
30 years ago, we used to raise our hand at these questions.
It's faster but less snazzy, right?
I didn't have fancy charts.
We can see the responses up here.
Not involved.
So 32% actively involved, 44% not involved, and then roughly 25% organization not involved in advocacy. So keep your phones out because we're going to come back to some polling later in our conversation. But I just want to invite you, Sonya, any observations about these numbers? Any surprises here?
No, it's pretty much what I would have expected. You know, but it's interesting because it's kind of like that, what part of the, a blind man touching an elephant, what part of the elephant? I bet the definition of advocacy with the way that everybody's answering that is very different. And I think one of the hopes that I have a year or 2 years from now with launching this campaign is that we all have a really clear role of advocacy, because some of us might have been talking about every once in a while we talk about things that and some might be taking to the streets. But the point about actively involved, you know, there might be, you know, with advocacy, I won't get into the legal definition, but I think we all kind of know it's informing, it's education. If you get involved in electoral politics, that's where things get a little shaky. But you can still educate your board on what role are the issues that different candidates are taking. But there might be issues that have adversely affected you that you don't even know because you weren't involved. And I can give 2 examples. One was when the recession really hit and the state governments were just really grappling. In the state of Washington, our previous governor, her basic line when people were coming to advocate for different budget line items, she'd just say, you know, cut to the chase, will anybody die if we don't fund this? And she meant that seriously. And, you know, but then they went around and they held, I think, 15 to 18 town hall meetings around the state to inform the budget. And once again, the governor said, you know, I started noticing it was the same issues coming up, pretty well organized, you know, hitting all those town halls. So I started looking for who wasn't there. And nobody from the arts showed up in all 15 meetings. Nobody from the arts showed up to advocate for the state role in the arts. And that was printed in the Sunday paper. And I happened to see her staff on Monday night, and I said, wow, I bet you were hammered today with arts organizations calling you. And she goes, haven't heard a word. So you can guess how the budget turned out. Nobody cared enough to show up. And another example that I heard our former governor, who's now head of our Seattle Foundation, Norm Rice, told about how he was really going to bat. This was in the 80s when he was a great governor, and there was a lot of land development going on in Seattle, and he wanted to make sure that certain areas were preserved for social services and arts and all, where he knew it was really important for building community. And he was really going head to head on some things, and he happened to run into some board members that night of one of the organizations that he was really putting some skin into, advocating for them. Board didn't know anything about it. And he said, you know, I decided I wasn't going to put that much effort, and he flipped it and gave it to another organization. So I doubt that organization ever really knew that they lost it because they weren't awake. But I think there's things like that you have to pay attention to that might adversely affect you if you don't pay attention.
We talked a little bit yesterday, and the title for this talk this morning is Accelerating the Pace of Change. I'm curious if you can share a story with us or sort of your perspective on how advocacy can really speed things up or be a game changer in terms of the pace of change.
Yeah. You know, again, advocacy skills are very similar to fundraising skills. Whether you're a staff or a board or something, you have to be able to articulate the mission. You have to be able to know the context of which you operate in. My guru, my fundraising guru from your lovely state again, Kay Sprinkle Grace, her quote is, donors give to organizations because they meet needs, not because they have needs. So a healthy board and a healthy fundraising organization really knows the needs they're meeting. And one example that I can give was I was working on a capital campaign in a small town, and the board was a little bit sleepy. And in particular, there were a couple men on the board that I thought, they're not going to be doing anything. But they got involved in advocating. You know, again, capital funds advocating is very targeted. You go to the legislature and all. But what they felt when they came back is that they had come out on their values, that they had really stood up in the public sector and advocated for these resources, and they were bringing them back to their town. And they actually infected the whole board in terms of really understanding what role, what niche they provided, because they had just made that case in front of the legislature. And it turned that board into kind of a sleepy, what's that term, rubber stamping board, into a real activist board because they understood what role they played in the community. And I was just in Heather McLeod's workshop about the new normal, and the healthy organizations are going to build networks. This organization has the biggest network in Eastern Washington now of connecting to every possible organization that can affect them, because their board went from being internally focused to being external ambassadors, and they're on fire about it.
So it sounds like there's actually an opportunity for advocacy to drive positive change within the boardroom itself and strengthening board performance in areas beyond advocacy itself. Can you talk a little bit more about?
Well, I think it's really that in terms of being comfortable being an advocate, whether it's going out and recruiting. Really, if you realize your niche in the community and you realize what your mission is, then you actually could look around at your board and be a little bit more, who's not represented here? And I've seen boards, again, when they're much more involved in representing their organization, go out and get the right people on their board so it's truly representative. They're not afraid of having those generative conversations because they see that they represent that C3 tax-exempt status. And so they better be having the conversations of, are we truly representing our community? Is this truly going to serve our constituents? They feel it's just a different sense of what their role is as a board member, rather than coming and looking just internally, and you're lucky I'm even here, which a lot of board members kind of have that of, I've worked all day long and I'll come and I'll approve the minutes, but turning it inside out in terms of my role is really to connect the community more. So.
And thinking of it as part of being an ambassador for the organization.
That's my responsibility.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Well, let's come back to the poll here. I want to invite everybody to share with us your take on how public policy is affecting your organization. And this is a question where you can select as many responses as are applicable to you, but you do need to send them as separate text, so you can't put all of the codes in one text. So feel free to vote here for everything that applies to you. They're still climbing, so we'll give folks a little more time.
I appreciate the 11% that say I'm not sure. We're never going to get anywhere if we're not honest there.
This is great. I'm going to go ahead and treat this as sort of a pulse of the room. So 25% changing or monitoring public policy is central to our mission. 26% we receive government funding. 38% public policy informs how we are able to do our work and or the communities that we serve. And then 12 to 13%, I'm not sure how public policy affects my organization. And I think this really gets at the opportunity in terms of advocacy. I mean, certainly if you're receiving government funding, that's a pretty clear connection, but also just in terms of thinking about the communities that we serve, and on a macro level, the role that the nonprofit sector plays within our economy, and the opportunity I think we have to leverage a little bit more of our collective clout, let's say, or our voices together. Both on behalf of the sector as a whole, but also on behalf of our individual missions and the communities that we serve. Any thoughts there from you?
Well, you think about 20 million board members in our sector, and no matter what election, whether it's Republican or Democrat, in the highest office, they never mention our sector. Yet they need us to do their work. They need us all for innovation and risk. This organization that they mentioned that I'm part of, Funders Together to End Homelessness, is about encouraging foundations to fund risk and innovation so that then government can scale it. But we have to have those conversations with government. We have to be at the table to have those conversations. So we need each other, but we're never referred to as a powerful force. So that's always kind of mystifying to me.
So we're gonna make this our final question, and I'm gonna just give you the bully pulpit. If you had this opportunity to make the case For those in the room who are not convinced, what would you say is the opportunity here and the need?
Well, this is great because I can also advertise our workshop after lunch. You're always worried that nobody will come. But our workshop after lunch is going to give a case study from an excellent CEO who really strategically flipped an organization. And I actually happened to be on that board that she was on and didn't realize I was being flipped until we were there. And it was masterful. But one of the things she did is she really took a look at the issues that affect our clients we serve. And it was immigration, it was housing policy, development, zoning, all kinds of things, unsexy issues, where if we didn't get involved, the people we serve would be adversely affected. And so I guess, my final bully pulpit is, and I know I've talked a lot, I know I'm bleeding human services here, but I'm just as passionate about the arts and wilderness and education, everything. If you think about the clients and the people you represent, they most likely don't have the access that your board members have to advocacy. And no matter what, when I'm asking for money, I'm asking for more money now, post-consulting, than I ever did when I was a consultant. But if I'm asking for money or I'm asking for a political leadership or something, I always have to take a deep breath and channel those people and think about, I have access, I have the opportunity. And I really encourage you. And one thing I can promise you, and I hope the BoardSource consultants here will back me up in this, but just the conversation alone in your boardroom will strengthen your board. Because they'll understand your niche, they'll understand your role, and they'll understand their passion. And when you dip your toe into public policy in the public arena, you're part of something bigger than you can ever be alone. For example, Gates Foundation, their $33 billion endowment is less than what the state of California spends on education in 1 year. But by getting involved and leveraging, the groups we funded in Seattle on advocacy around homelessness, they helped leverage $1.2 billion in resources. We don't have that. So I encourage you that just the conversation alone will make your board realize that they're connected to a greater whole. And Terry Tempest Williams, she's a great poet and writer, she talks about the eyes of the future are looking back at us, and they're praying that we will be on our knees and look beyond our time. So we can do this. It's something bigger, and I guarantee you it'll strengthen your board.
Well said. Thank you. This really is what we hope is the beginning of a conversation. You will be hearing more from BoardSource about this campaign. We are just in the building stages right now. Some of you may have seen that we sent out a survey asking for your input about the role that advocacy plays in your organization and your input on what might create some positive changes around board participation and advocacy. If you haven't seen that survey, don't worry, we'll send it to you again. We would love your input. We really want this to be a collaborative campaign that's about creating a culture change, and we look forward to all of you who want to be a part of it, being a part of it. And I would just echo, Sonya, your comments that in the meantime, please go back or consider going back into your boardroom and having a conversation, because it really does start there. And we're so thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with you and to build this campaign. We're going to go ahead and take a break now here for lunch, and then we will come back and hear from our Judith O'Connor lecturer, Sterling Spearn. Thank you all.